Welcome back to another episode of the Strongman Winner Circle podcast. My name is Nicholas Canby, and this is episode 61 with Wesley Derwinsky of Canada. Wes has been competing since 2017 and has been on a tear recently, taking third at North America's Strongest Man, second at the official Strongman Games, and on his first trip to World's Strongest Man, finishing sixth in the final. So let's hear his story, let's hear his thoughts, and also future plans for Wes on today's episode of the Strongman Winner Circle podcast. So make sure you tune in to learn more about this Canadian moose monster. All right, Wes, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, buddy.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure having you on. But not sure if you could tell by the introduction, but it looks like you have a common celebration after Stones.
I also noticed that this year after Stones that I just naturally do that. Apparently,
it's pretty cool. It definitely catches the attention, but of course you see all the passion and enthusiasm, of course, especially after finishing off something like Stones. But yeah, I was glad to hear this is your first ever podcast. So let's just start things easy. Let's just start how you got into the sport originally, and what inspired you to start Strongman.
So I think it was World's Strongest Man 2010. I probably would have seen it in 2011 because of how they air it. But saw it on, as you know, the air dates, but saw that on TV and just kind of always been the bigger guy in, school or the group of friends. And I just saw it and I was like, I could do that. And started just working out for the 2 years. And then actually in 2014 is when I started competing, not 2017.
Okay. All right. I should have mentioned the international scene, right? Because that was the U23 Worlds that you did through Ultimate. All right.
The national show that I did. Yeah. So saw 2010 on TV, saw Zadrunas and Derek Poundstone, and looked up the old YouTube training videos. And at that time, Derek and pretty much Ortmeyer were about one of the only few guys doing anything online, and just binge watched all their videos and just kept training and slowly built up a strongman collection of equipment over the years. And the story writes itself after that.
Oh, wow. So how long? So actually, first of all, how old are you when you first started strongman training?
When I did my first show, I was 17 or 18. Yeah. Oh, wow. And just never stopped, never looked back since.
All right, excellent. And then you're 28 now, is that right?
Yeah, I'll be 29 at the Shaw Classic this year.
Okay, all right. So about almost 11 years. You wouldn't know it, but yeah, of course, 11 years of hard work, and sometimes it takes a decade of work to get to the highest levels. So what were some of those kind of early years looking like? So was JF's federation established back when, or what was in Canada back when you first started?
Yeah, so JF circuit did exist. I don't know if I believe Mike Saunders actually started the strongman circuit in Canada, and then JF partnered with him and then took it over. I believe that's how it went, but as of right now, it's just JF that runs it. But when I started, there were, the old homegrown shows out in parking lots and a part of festivals and things like that. So no weight classes, no age categories, no nothing, just open all the way, whether you're 18 years old or 40 years old or 100 pounds or 400 pounds. You just signed up, you paid the entry fee, you got that awesome free t-shirt that we always get. And we just slugged it out throughout the day through 5 or 6 events. And I did that for probably the first 4 or 5 years of my strongman career before I turned pro and got the invite to join the Canadian strongman circuit that JF runs.
Now, how did you turn pro?
So in Canada, before COVID, we used to have provincial shows. So we had Ontario Strongest Man, Quebec Strongest Man, and then everything east of Quebec had their own show. That was Eastern Canada Strongest Man. And then everything west of Ontario, they had Western Canada Strongest Man. And the top 4 at the time when I was coming up from Ontario would qualify for Canada's Strongest Man. And if you weren't already a pro at that time, you earned a pro card by being one of the top 4 guys. And I got mine in 2016 or 2017, I believe it was. And actually maybe 2018, 17 or 18. And then I earned my spot into Canada's Strongest Man. And that's how I joined the strongman circuit in Canada.
All right. Interesting. Of course, the way to set it up. Now have they changed it after COVID?
Yeah, it's drastically different now. Now that Max and Sam run Strongman Corp in Canada, the open, I don't know if it's the first place guy or the top 3 in the open category through Strongman Corp. JF then allows them to become a pro in the pro strongman circuit with us. So it's a little bit more tiered nowadays, whereas back in the day it was just kind of one show, or there was also JF would run pro-ams, and then if you were on the podium as an amateur in that show, you could then get your pro card as well. So that's kind of how our Ontario Strongest Man used to be run. It was a pro-am. So like when I got mine, I did it against Maxime and a few other guys that people unfortunately don't know, but they should, like Carl Yelholt, Ben Ruxtel, Eric Rottenberg, Lance Lavallee, all these great guys that unfortunately are now retired, most of them, and it's really just me, Max, and Lance that are left. It's kind of an older generation of strong.
Have I met Lance? Is it Joe? Is that Joey?
No. So Lance runs Cerberus Strength Canada.
Okay. All right. All right, but no relation to Joey Lavallee?
No, they're not actually related. No.
Okay. All right. That's confusing, right? Because isn't there a few Rehumes that are not related to?
Fred and Gab, and they're twin brothers, and I would consider them the strongest twins in the world. And then there's 1 or 2 other guys in Quebec. I guess Rion might be kind of a common name.
Man, those last names, the French Canadians that's confusing. So yeah. I bet. But yeah, but that's quite the circuit. So I know, of course, when we talk about being a pro, especially in the US, that for like the 105 level, it kind of opened up a few shows. Sometimes it was only like 2 that we got guaranteed. And then for the heavyweights over the years, it's been like 1 or 2 or 3 shows. But what does a Canadian pro card get you access to? Is it all the circuit shows?
Yeah, so it allows you to any of the Strongman Pro circuit shows here in Canada. Majority of them are run throughout Quebec, and there's probably 1 or 2 every month from April, depending on weather, or the festivals, because we tie in with the rodeo circuit the last few years. So most of the time we're doing most of these events and shows on like dirt and inside the rodeo ring. So, running with 900 to 1,000 pounds with a frame or a yoke on dirt sometimes isn't the easiest, but I think that's what makes us a bit more nitty-gritty strongman up here in Canada, is we just get it done no matter what the environment is. But yeah, like the guys in Quebec, man, like I feel bad for them sometimes because, most of us outside Quebec can't always make the trip. And those guys slug it out almost once or twice a month. From June till about September, October. And, that's probably another reason why when we compete internationally, the guys always ask us how we do so many shows in a year. And that's just the way we come up learning the sport.
Interesting. But it sounds like the pro status gets you about a dozen shows a year.
Yeah, anywhere from 7 to probably 10 or 12 shows, throughout the year.
Wow, that's very cool. I never knew all that. So of course that was good education on my end, and of course anybody in potentially Canada that's listening that's interested in becoming a pro one day. But of course, let's talk about your run at Worlds, especially since you're the 6th strongest man in the world right now. How did training look, and when did you start kind of really focusing on World's Strongest Man? Like how many weeks out did you start your prep?
So many people are so specific. I don't know when I started focusing on it, but pretty much from when they invited me, which I think my official invite was around March or maybe a little after that. And then just talking with JF, we just slowly continued training. And then probably about maybe 12 or 14 weeks out, we're just, okay, now we got to get a little more specific or as specific as we can with the events details that we were given. But for the most part, when you've been in the sport as long as we have, and you've seen worlds, there's going to be a press, there's going to be a stone, a deadlift, or a squat. So you can generalize training pretty well and just be ready until they give you the specific events.
Now, is JF your coach?
Yeah, correct.
All right. So how does working with someone like JF kind of helped you during your career? How long has he been your coach?
I think we're going on 2 years now, maybe 2.5. Yeah. So it's been good. Most of the tips and tricks, at least at the national level, I kind of knew. And then it's helpful because he's so experienced with worlds and other international shows that are further away. He gives a little more secrets, like, his biggest thing going to worlds was as soon as I got there, sign up for the recovery room, because as soon as full, it doesn't matter. There's no more spots. So he said, as soon as you get there, put your name on it. Make sure you're feeling good, things like that.
All right. Interesting. Now during your prep, what were the kind of like some of the biggest challenges that you faced? Of course, getting ready for all 12 events that you end up doing.
The biggest thing would just be the axle. Unfortunately, it's just probably my weakest event, and I zeroed it unfortunately in the finals there, and it was kind of expected, but I felt pretty good going into it. But I just struggle with the clean from my stomach to my chest, and it's just something we have to work on. Just something that I've neglected over the years, and unfortunately, it bit me in the butt at one of the biggest shows.
Now, was it the first time doing a max axle, or have you done it a couple times prior?
I think I've done it maybe a handful of times before, but we've never really opened with that heavy before or anything like that. So, we stepped up to an even bigger boys league. So unfortunately, I couldn't make that jump at this time, and we'll just go back to the drawing board and keep working at it.
Sure. I'm a big axler myself. I always have a suggestion in terms of like kind of off-season training for the axle, a lot of power cleans and muscle cleans. So that helps kind of build the bar path. But I think a lot of times people will try to almost like reverse curl the axle when it's more of a kind of like a shrug up. So if any little, I always happy to help. But yeah, that was, I think it's also kind of, it was tough. It was interesting. The axle had knurling. It was fixed. They didn't make it easy for you guys, especially being in the heat. Now, did you like compared to like OSG, did you add weight? Did you lose weight? Did you say that relatively the same? Did you have like a goal in mind when it comes to like body composition for World's Strongest Man?
I've never really focused on gaining weight or losing weight or anything like that. Just if I'm getting stronger, that's the main goal. As long as the weight on the bar or the implement is going up, I'm not too concerned about body weight. I've always kind of been the last few years somewhere anywhere from like 300 to 310. When we go to Worlds or like the Shaw, and I spend a week in America and all I do is eat American fast food, a few extra pounds there, or at least I loaded enough that I do. So, I'm never one that's too concerned about body weight.
All right. No, of course that makes sense. But going into World's Strongest Man, of course you got into a pretty tough group. You're in with Tom Stoltman, but yeah, tell us a little bit about the group stages and of course kind of competing. Now, did you probably had also had some other tough guys like Jaco Schoonwinkel, your group. But yeah, tell us in terms of like how it was like in your first year competing there.
Yeah. So, obviously it was a little nerve wracking when we get there because none of us knew what our groups were. I think for a whole day we had to sit at the hotel and worry about that. And I knew in the back of my mind, I have the worst luck, and I knew I was going to get Tom in my group. And after I came out of one of the media meetings, someone showed me the list. And of course, there it was, me and Tom in the same group with Jaco and Bobby and Nate as well. I think a lot of people didn't see Nate as a threat or myself as a threat. And I've competed with Nate now 2 or 3 times, and I know how well-rounded he is. And unfortunately, he didn't have the performance that he wanted, but I knew going through the heats that I still had to keep Nate in the back of my mind as well.
Sure. But yeah, it was interesting how they looking at it. taking a look who we ended up doing media stuff with and who we went to the boneyard with. So
Yeah.
I had Mitch like it was the same coloring in the schedule and also at the boneyard with me. So I'm like, I have a feeling I'm gonna be in Mitch's group, which is
it was kind of predictable when you're looking around. You're like, I think I know why we're here with these people or something like that. So yeah.
It was quite interesting. So, what was it? What was the feeling like heading into the finals, and what did you end up doing in between the two on the rest day in between the two pretty much the two event or two contests pretty much since it was two contests in one at World's Strongest Man.
Yeah. So after the 2 brutal days of the heats, we had that day off, and unfortunately, we had the guys who made the finals. We had another day of like media and a few other things that we had to do, and more event testing. And then we got to come back to the hotel and relax with the rest of you guys that were having a few drinks by the pool there. Mm-hmm. But I think that was probably the worst day of the whole week. It was so hot and humid that day, and I felt so beat up, worse than the day before. But I got some work done in the recovery room, and I felt a little better after that. But
did you ice tub it?
I try. Those ice tubs that are at Worlds, they're next level. They're cold, man.
They're right. It wasn't just me because I normally do pretty well when it's just like you dump a bunch of ice, but just for the listeners, it was powered by a machine, so it was always kept at a certain temperature, and the water was continually flowing, so it never sat still. So that made it extra cold, and I think I could only do like 1 minute in there, especially I was doing it after the events on the qualifier days.
Yeah, my lower body pretty good, but just getting in up to starting putting your hands in and your elbows, it just gets real cold real quick.
All right, absolutely. Yeah. So tell us going to the finals. Were you nervous? Were you excited? Were you like, it's great to be in the finals on my first year? But yeah, tell us your thoughts and how you felt.
Yeah, it felt good to be in the finals because at that point there was almost no expectations. Like just making it through the heats and making the finals was the big expectation that myself and JF put on me. And once we were in, we knew that we had a few good events in the finals, so that I should at least place well. And making it into finals, I knew that I wanted to at least give a good crack at the world record, and we did that. And overall, we're pleased with the performance, but looking back, there's a few places where we dropped points, and ifs and ands can always be said, but I think that a 4th place finish was in the reach of it myself, but fortunately I just let it slip through my hands. So we'll just do better next time.
So outside the axle, is there anything else you were looking to improve upon?
I think the frame and the yoke medley, I could have done a lot better at, but
you finished, didn't you? Or close to finishing?
Just got in by the skin of my teeth.
Okay.
But I think a lot of us underestimated the frame just because of the weight. It was only like 720 or 730 or something like that. But after our second 1,000-pound yoke on that surface, it was pretty squishy. And once I got out from under it, my legs just felt like jello. So it wasn't so much the grip was an issue. It was just walking. Once I dropped the frame the first time, trying to repick it, the legs just had nothing in them. So it was just a battle of inches after that.
Sure. One thing I always kind of, even in my seminars when I'm talking to amateurs, is always kind of taking account of surfaces. You were mentioning about like the tough surfaces in the rodeos, and then we had the surfaces at World's Strongest Man. Did you feel that especially yoke walking the stage, you were like digging into the stage?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad, but definitely in the heats when I was inside the car and I looked out my lane, I could see that it went like this, and at one point it went like that and came back up. And when I watch my video back, I can see when I'm walking, when I get to that dip, the back wheels touch a bit and it knocked me a bit. So it slowed me down, and I just had to slow down a little bit, get my feet back under me, and then continue on. But I've walked on much worse surfaces, so it's not too bad.
All right. So you were prepped for it. You're ready. So in training, it looked like you had some really good throws in you. You were kind of hoping you get to that stage where you get the opportunity to go for a record throw. But overall, tell us a little bit about your throwing training. Was it to par? Was it a good? Was it great training? Was it subpar? Yeah, tell us about it.
I only, unfortunately, myself and my wife, we just moved recently the last few months, so I had to leave all my equipment at home. And we went home one weekend, and I went to our friend's house that has some Highland games set up. So I did the keg toss one time leading up to Worlds.
Once.
Yeah, and it rained the night before, so when I was throwing, my feet were about that far into the mud, so I couldn't really get too explosive, or I was going to sit on my ass real quick. But I threw it. I think it was about 24 feet, like 3 or 4 times in a row, no problem. So once I did that once or twice, I was like, okay, throwing kegs for me is like riding a bike. Once I do it once or twice, it's good to go.
All right. Well, I want to get to your keg throwing abilities later, but first, we should take a look at the record throw.
Sounds good.
I thought you were trying to get all the chalk off your hands, because was that the move?
I was just trying to do something cool for TV, you know.
It was very cool, very, very memorable.
In my head, looking back, it's like, it doesn't look as cool as you thought in your head it did.
You know what? That keg event was interesting, and that's one thing that, even looking into, just outside looking in and coming into our first Worlds, like, if someone said you're going to be out there throwing kegs for 2 hours and waiting in between, I don't think I would believe someone if they even said that. But what were you thinking, and like, how did you stay cool and composed during that event?
When keg toss is in a show, I just look at it as almost like a break between events, because if it's a run, usually I'm done in about 20, 30 seconds. So, it's only a 30-second burst of energy and then you're done. With the keg for height, there was nothing to really freak out about. Just try and keep your blood pressure down, your heart rate down, and just make every throw perfect. And that's where I think I excel in that, is that I'm not as strong as Tom or Mitch or Evan, who was keeping up with me, but my technique is virtually flawless. So as long as my throws felt good, I knew they would go over every time. And I'm the only guy who threw one keg every attempt. Everybody else threw multiple kegs almost every attempt. I didn't miss one until we went past the world record.
All right, interesting. So let's build on that. So what do you attribute your technique in throwing to?
Coming up in the sport in Ontario, I believe at one point, and including JF and Jimmy Paquette, I'd say Canada probably had 4 or 5 of the top throwers in the world at one time, and I had to throw against them regularly throughout the summer. So I would throw against Maxime, Jimmy, and JF, and another guy that 2 other guys we used to compete with, Ben Ruxtel and Carl Yelholt. They were all, I was at the tail end of all these guys, but every show that I did, I would get either another keg over, or I'd start shaving seconds off and start catching on these guys. And eventually, unfortunately, a few of them retired, so I never actually get to beat the event. But now I'm to the point where if it's me and Max in the show, depending on who goes first, we kind of, as long as we don't make a mistake, we set the standard, and the next guy has to try and beat it. And I've beaten Max once or twice now, because I've had to make him rush and go a little bit quicker, and he's just either made a mistake or rushed on it, or just the throw didn't go as planned, and I've come out on top, luckily.
All right. So you competed against all these great throwers. So what were they doing right in terms of their throw mechanics that made them such great throwers?
It was Carl Yelholt who told me, or it was telling someone else at a show, throwing bags and kegs, it's just a snatch. And as soon as he said that, and I watched him do it, it clicked in my head. So, it's when I look at a lot of people throwing, and a lot of people tell them, like, they're doing much more of a kettlebell hip thrust, instead of, like, it's a squat, and that last pull has to be a snatch. There's no arc with it. It needs to come straight to your body on that last pull. and you should be ending like we always said YMCA. You should be up in the air with your hands in a Y, like as if you had the bar over your head. Body fully extended, toes and everything off the ground. And when that clicked, I just went back to the drawing board and I just started throwing. And I don't practice runs because I can finish a run. So I just pick, I start with like a 45-pound bag for a little warm up, throw it for a few reps. And then I pick my 60-pound bag or maybe 65, and I do sets of 5 with that. And I don't rush it. I just do 5 throws. If I don't get one over, that's a failed attempt. I don't get an extra throw in my set, and I just make sure I do 5 perfect throws. And I always throw higher. I throw 16 feet at home.
Okay, all right. Those are all pretty good tips. So you're big believer into the follow through when it comes to throwing.
Yeah.
All right. That's one thing I kind of struggle with. I believe it or not, my throwing has gotten better over the years, but it's still not even close to heavyweight standard. It wasn't even close to the 231 standard at the time. So it's just a real big hurdle for myself, but something that I'm trying to put a lot of time into. I see a lot of kind of almost a hop step. I don't quite do. I kind of like walk into place and get the momentum there, like especially on sandbags, but kind of a hop step into it. I think that's something that I need to start working on. I don't know if you have any kind of more suggestions on that.
Yeah, it seems like JF does the hop step, and then everybody else in Quebec always just kind of follows what JF does.
All right.
But I'm usually about one step back from the bags. So every time I throw, once I'm coming back, I'm taking one step and I'm reaching for the bag. And on that pull back, that's the back swing. And then I'm throwing on that next one. So instead of having to hop back with the bag, I'm just using my body's momentum and the weight of that bag to pull back. And it goes between my legs and then release on that. I've also tried to describe it as if guys played football. So like Thomas Evans and I were talking one day, and I said it should be real easy for him because the guys who play line, as soon as that ball is snapped, it's just you're coming up and you're jamming that guy and you're sinking your hips under you and you're trying to drive up. As soon as I try and relay that to guys who have played football, they seem to get it within a few couple throws because you got to, on that last pull, it's not just pulling with your back and shooting your hips through. Your hips have to drop down, push forward, and you're snatching and pushing with your legs up, right?
Sure.
So that and a lot of people they think it's just a swing, and that's on their last throw they're still getting that arc with it, whereas it needs to come up the body, not out in front of the body.
Now, do you? I'll have to take a look.
Yeah.
But especially in slow motion. But do you end up bending in the arms, kind of like in the snatch, or is it, your arms usually stay straight?
They're probably bent a little bit, but
Okay.
obviously once things start getting heavier, you start pulling with the arms a bit more. With the kegs, it's a bit more of an arc than the bags. The bags you can snatch much easier. With the keg, because it's a bit more of a solid object, there's a bit more of an arc to it, but it's still trying to snatch and pull up the body on that last pull.
Sure. All right. Excellent. Well, those are all kind of great tips. So hope everybody was taking some notes, especially the listeners. So going forward, Wes. So talking about like other kind of events, I think one thing that came up a lot during the fan questions was the ridiculous grip strength of all the Canadians, and also including yourself. Of course, I've been following you for a little bit. Of course, I remember seeing you do a 200-kilo farmer's walk in a JF event. I think that was the first time. I think it was a couple of years ago when I first saw that. But why do Canadians have all these crazy grip strength, or is it just trying to keep up with JF's demands?
I think it just a lot of us come from blue collar jobs and from being at North America's last year, talking with Spencer Remick, I was busting their balls about how all the Americans got bumped out of the max wheelbarrow, and the only people left were all the Canadians. He said it's pretty hard to find a show in America with farmers over 350 pounds, and 350 is kind of like where we start. Like Like we did medley at Canadians 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a 900-pound yoke into a 365 farmers. Like it just the standard for us is just a bit higher, I guess, and we just don't like to go any lower. Like our provincial qualifier for Canadians is this weekend, I think, or next weekend, and it's 400 pounds a hand. So that's a pro-am show. So
All right.
it is higher, I guess.
Interesting. So you don't run much like grip assistance after your farmer's training. Are you pretty straightforward in terms of I'm doing the required sets of my program and that's it?
Yeah. Hopefully JF doesn't see this because he has grip stuff program, and I've checked it, throw Tristan under the bus too, but neither of us have like ever done any of the grip work that's been put into our program. And I've had guys over the years ask me like, what do I do for grip? What do I do for grip? And I tell them I do strongman, I do farmers, I do frame, I do sandbag carries, like all these things that just work the grip. I don't wear straps outside of deadlifts. Everything I do, accessory work, everything, it's just my hands. And I've just been lucky, I guess, as well. Just my grip has improved over the years.
All right. Now, what does JF usually program?
So
Those sets and exercises that you didn't do, what did he want you to do?
usually there's like some double overhand axle for some singles, some rolling thunder work, some grippers, some body weight hangs just from the chin up bar for like 30 seconds to a minute. Just basic stuff.
Interesting. All right. I like, of course, I always curious about the grippers, if that was something, because I've seen it in other situations. But the Rolling Thunder is interesting. And I figured like double overhand would always transfer over well to a few different events. And then the other fan question was, some people were taking notice of your stone. So of course you had the great stone off against Yako. Of course, Yako is a great stone loader himself. You won the stones over at OSG. Now when it comes to stones, was that like an event that came easy for you, or just another things where you just do series and loads all the time?
Definitely not. I have been screwed on stones in the past, multiple times. And if you watch the Shaw Classic from 2 years ago, I lost a 5 or 5.5 point lead to Thomas Evans because I had a stone and cost me making the Shaw the strongest man on earth last year. But unfortunately, it's the way it goes. We roll with the punches. But since then, I just bang out stones every week. Thankfully, again, JF likes to make everything harder in Canada. So like the minimum height we load to here is 56 inches. So you really have to triple extend with a stone. And that's for all weights of the stone. The first stone is 56 and the last stone is 56. Whether it's 300 pounds or 440 pounds, the podium height is 56 inches. And that definitely paid off for the stone off, because the bar was, in maybe a Canadian opinion, fairly low. So the stone being, I think the last one was 440. It definitely helped that when we had to do reps with it, the bar is a bit lower, so we don't have to use quite as much energy to extending with it.
Oh, interesting. Of course, I like always kind of training to a higher height. I usually do that with kind of like, especially with smaller stones. I try to go even over 60, but of course, maybe I'll kind of force myself, especially the heavier stone. I did have probably one of my better preps when it came to stone loading, but unfortunately, I didn't really get to show that at Europes and Worlds because, of course, because of the bicep and the forearm. But next year, I'll show you what's up. But talking about competitions, so let's look ahead. We were, of course, before the podcast, we were talking about your busy schedule. So looks like we have, hopefully I have the right order, but no big deal if it's not. But North America Strongest Man on Earth, Giants Live World Finals, Canadian Strongest Man, and the Magnuson v. Magnuson Classic. So 2 of those shows being JF shows, 1 of those being Brian's shows. So how does one get themselves ready for that type of abuse over, is that, what did I say, 5 shows?
10 years of strongman will get you used to that kind of abuse. But you still feel like you got hit by a car at the end of each show. But thankfully, North America's and Strongest Man on Earth have a lot of similar events, so
Right.
they're gonna have a lot of carryover. So there's not too much, difference in training there. The main focus is Strongest Man on Earth, and we're just gonna go to North America's and obviously still be competitive, but we're not gonna take any big risks or anything like that. We're gonna make sure that we're playing it safe and smart, and still try and come out with the best finish that we can there. But the other shows, I believe the week or weekend after Strongest Man on Earth, we have Canada's Strongest Man.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always fun, just doing back-to-back weekends. And then thankfully there's a bit of a break, and then we have the tour finals in Scotland, and then another few weeks, and then we're going to go to Iceland and do the Magnus show. So it's going to be an interesting series of shows, but we just got to take one at a time. That's all.
Absolutely. But one thing I do admire that I always, of course, appreciate that all the pros in Canada always kind of run and do Canada's Strongest Man. Of course, having that pride of being Canada's Strongest Man. So it's interesting because it's probably going to be pretty stacked. Of course, like you and Hoth coming in as, of course, being fresh off the of course, World's Strongest Man finals, going to World's Strongest Man on Earth. You, of course, have individual like Maxime, who's coming back, who wants, of course, kind of show why he's one of the best men in Canada. Of course, you have someone like Simon, who won Canada's Strongest Man and still feels like he needs to keep proving himself. So it's pretty interesting. So on the American side of things, I think we're getting closer. So in the past couple of years, of course, 2 years ago we had Bobby and Trey doing it. This past year we had like Lucas, Marcus, Rob Kearney, and Bobby was on it. Trey didn't come because he was hurt, but we're close to getting all the pros coming. I think the only thing that's like really missing, if like for instance, like if Martins and Singleton could come to America's Strongest Man, then we do have a real America's Strongest Man. But I feel like on the Canadian side, I feel like you guys always have a pretty good turnout. Almost all the pros, maybe excluding one, but all the pros come for that show.
Yeah, barring injuries, usually all of us show up. And the last few years, 4 or 5 of us have usually competed the week before at the Shaw, and then usually 2 or 3 weeks before that, we've done North America's or our Eastern qualifier or our Western qualifier. So, none of us are ever coming in fresh, but it's doing Canada's Strongest Man. It's not about money; it's just about pride and having that title. And thankfully, a lot of us at the top level, we still care about that title. Unfortunately, it doesn't guarantee us anything, but at the end of the day, when you win, you get to say you're your country's strongest man. And, that's at the end of the day as well. When we get into the sport, that's what you want. You want to be the strongest man of Canada, America, the world, the Netherlands, whatever it is.
Well, hopefully one day you can win Canada's Strongest Man and then leverage that for a beer sponsorship. I feel that will work out. So your course going over to the World Tour Finals in Scotland. So will that be your first overseas trip?
No, I did my second Worlds under 23. We did.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so it's been a while, but so where was that? Sorry, you kind of cut out a little bit. So where was that U23 show?
It was in Stoke-on-Trent. It was the same day Team World Championships that year.
Okay, all right. So where Eddie Hall's from?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Is that the year that Paul Smith won?
No, Paul won my first year, the previous year in Quebec.
Okay, all right, got it. All right. Now, who won that year?
I believe it was Martynas Barokas from Lithuania.
Okay, all right. I'm not too familiar with him, so I'm not sure.
He has since retired. Me and Paul were even laughing that, like, from our U23 days, myself, him, and Stefan Torfelson, the other reserve, only 3 guys kind of left, or at least at this level now, that are competing.
All right, interesting. It's sometimes when those individuals compete early, get some injuries, then if they don't have their kind of personal life in order, sometimes it can be really tough. But we always say strongman is not for the weak of heart. So
Definitely better on the other side of this sport.
yeah, absolutely. So let's keep on the Canadian theme. So since 2021, there's been 6 different Canadians in the finals. So yourself, Tristan Hoth, Mitchell Hooper, JF, Maxime
Yep.
Boudreau, and Gabriel Rieume. As well as, and within the Canadian scene, there's also a lot of good up and coming heavyweights, as well as weight class athletes, and of course our female athletes. But where's this surge of Canadian excellence coming from, in your opinion?
I don't know. I think we've just honestly been overlooked the last few years, or you could even maybe say decade. But when you have JF, who has just before his injuries and everything, he was just the most dominant athlete here. There was no one here could touch him in the shows. And then Maxime broke in, and then once they had Maxime and JF, like those guys were the top 2 in Canada for a long time, and it just took these last few years for the rest of us to kind of catch up and just have things go our way. Unfortunately with injuries, like Maxime broke his ankle and kind of sat out a year, and then that kind of gave us some opportunities to get our names in. And then a few of us now we went the OSG route, and we succeeded or got kind of into the top 10 and things of that nature and got our names out there. So, I'd say we've just been overlooked, but we just kind of been lingering in the shadows, just building our strengths up. That's all.
Sure. I always think it would be cool if, I think this year they're not doing the World's Strongest Nation, but they added a Canadian team, and then maybe one day they added another team and keep adding countries team and kind of fill a roster. But I think the tough part about doing maybe a 6 or 8 person roster is just the women's side of things, right?
Yeah.
I think Canada, the US, England can all kind of fill out those rosters, but I think the other countries would be kind of tough. But that would be right. But that would be, of course, very exciting if they did one day. So let's talk about kind of just the sport in general. Doesn't have to be necessarily professional or world's strongest man, but just kind of what you see online. What do you see as a, of course, pro strongman, be competing for 10 years? Is there anything in the sport that grinds your gears that you see that just says, you know what, I don't like that?
Just everyone kind of coming in and they're like 2-3 years in and thinking they belong like in the top, or people just say like, oh, I'm as strong as this guy, or I beat this guy, like I could beat this guy, I should be in that show. And well, unfortunately, unless you've proven it multiple times, winning something once or beating someone once, everyone has a good day, everyone has a bad day, but unless you're doing it consistently, then you might not be deserving of that shot or that title of something like that,
Interesting. Yeah, that's a little bit of kind of, I've had some similar thoughts, especially when in the US there's a few different federations, and I've even seen it even when I started kind of competing, even when I was doing like kind of Europe's, there's individuals that will compete for different federations, but believe they should, that work that they did in the different federation should transfer over to the other federation.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's like if you put your eggs in all one basket and try to go to a different one, I always say seeing is believing. So I think it's important to compete in front of multiple promoters. It's important for people to kind of see you actually compete, because they can see training videos, they can see, competition videos, but when you kind of act physical contests and they can kind of see, breathe, smell, feel everything that's going on, then that's a little more, they get a little more of an idea of the type of athlete you are. So like I got a lot of slack for like, so there's a big Frenchman. He's like 5 times France strongest man, and all his followers were upset he didn't get invited to Europe's strongest man, but he never once did OSG. And then he also, anytime he did an international show, he always gets rocked. So So I had a lot of those guys coming at me, but unfortunately he needs to prove it outside of France.
Yeah, there's like the other, another thing that grinds my gears, like these guys, compete in the same shows over and over again against the same people. And the biggest advice when I started, and all these pro guys, Brian, JF, Derek Poundstone, all these old guys, all the new guys that are at the top, all they ever said was compete, compete, compete.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the biggest thing actually that grinds my gears, and it's in Canada, and it's no fault of anybody, but everyone peaks for each show, and in my eyes, that's powerlifting. That's not strongman. Because in Canada, at least, we have a season at which we do it. So we start in May, April, May, and we go till September, October. You need to be going through that season, building, and maybe peak one or two lifts here at this show, one or two at this show, see where they're at, all in culmination for that last show. So now that we have Strongman Corp in Canada, everyone seems to be doing 3 shows a year, and that's it. They don't compete outside those 3 shows, which in my eyes is not necessarily hurting the sport, but it's not growing it as much as I think it could. Because when I came up, I would compete once or twice a month from those dates from April, May to September, October, and we were competing at festivals and carnivals and anything that we could in parking lots with mom and dad watching and our girlfriends or something.
Mm-hmm.
But we were getting the sport into the public eye, and I was learning every show from these veteran guys, or I could show someone else that was coming into the sport how to do this or how to do that. But now everyone just does, I believe in the States it would be like a regional, and then we have our provincial show, and then they have the nationals. And most people only do those 3 shows, and they're peaking for all 3 of those shows. And I had this conversation with someone at one of our gyms where they podiumed at nationals, and the following year they still peaked for the 2 shows prior. And I tried to ask them, why would you peak for those 2 shows if you're already technically one of the best in the country? You should be able to breeze through those shows, earn your qualification to the nationals, and put a bigger and better, stronger package together for nationals, and then hopefully come out on top. In my eyes, you're straining your body more than need be by peaking 2 or 3 times before your national level show, where you could just build and build through those 2 shows and put together a bigger, stronger package at that national level, and then be ready to make that next step up to our level instead of having a big crash and have another rebuild. But
sure. I always think that strongman, I think everybody's a little different. I think the bigger you are, I think the more probably peaks you can have, but usually most strongmen can have like 2 really good peaks in a year. Yeah. And then you just got to figure out how all these other contests kind of fill in around those peaks, because you still want to compete, you still want to get experience. And even after, even if you take a off season, even if it's 2 or 3 months, you're still going to get rusty. But I'm getting a little far ahead of myself. I had another question. How many competitions have you done?
Oh, probably over 50.
All right. Excellent.
Probably 5 to 10 a year for the first 5 or 6 years. And then once I turned pro, because of opportunities, and then COVID kind of hurt us pretty bad up here, probably dropped down to about 2 or 3 in COVID. And then after COVID, now we're back up to 5 to 7 a year.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think you got me beat, but I think I'm around 45 or 46. So, and that's across 12 years. But kind of like the same thing. But what I used to do was, even as a 105, we didn't have tremendous opportunities. At one point, we only had America's Strongest Man 105 and World's Strongest Man, and then we try to fill in everything else. Lately, right now, there's the most opportunity ever. So there's regionals. Brian Shaw just started a 105 shows. There's groups like PSL, SDL, Ultimate Strongman. So there's a lot of opportunities, but for a while we only had those two. So I used to jump into heavy shows just to gain experience. So I did a show just to do keg toss, just to do a squat, just because I've never done those before. So I think it's always important to have those shows that you'll execute on. So those are when you do a 12-week prep, but you should do shows where just to gain experience. So I always tell the same thing to the young kids, is to compete as much as as more often that you can, or as possible, just because you don't really get to learn about yourself. And at the end of the day, you're a strongman competitor, and the word competitor means compete. So that's also a muscle in itself. So it's important to get out there. Do you agree?
Yeah, and learning to compete as well, not just training, right? Because when you get there on the day, it's totally different than training. It's not your equipment; it's a different environment. Yeah, you don't know what your warm up is going to be like, So trying to tell these people, to use maybe these quote unquote lower level shows or not as important shows. You need to use them as training days as well. But it's a training day on learning how to compete and how to manage yourself through that day.
Absolutely. And you just learn a lot about yourself, and then you apply that towards your next training, and you just get bigger, stronger, better. So for you, of course, getting to Worlds, broke a world record, all pretty cool. But what other major goals do you have that you're looking to accomplish for the years to come?
Just now that we've broke into kind of the top group, I'd just like to stay there and for as long as I possibly can, and move my way up the ranks. After making the finals this year and having decent events for me in the finals, and unfortunately letting like that fourth, fifth place slip away. Not every show is the same, so it could have went a completely different way, or it could have went even better. So looking back, technically, a podium, if I can improve on myself, isn't necessarily out of the question. So just moving towards that, just trying to get onto a podium at now these bigger, heavier shows.
Sure, that'd be great. Now, for instance, do you have any aspirations to ever like build a gym, become a coach, become a podcaster like myself? Is any aspirations that kind of like involve in strongman?
Yeah, so my wife and I have run shows the last few years. And when we move back to the Niagara region, we'll do that again. I'd like to try and run like a pro show or a higher level show where I can pay for the guys to come and we'll have good prize money. And because the equipment I have is like no other. There's only 2 or 3 of us in Canada that kind of have the amount of equipment that I have, and it's myself, JF, Maxime, and one gym out west that has the amount of equipment and the diversity of equipment that I have.
Sure.
So I run a really good 8 to 10 event 2-day show, and really beat the guys up and have a good time at it. But other than that, opening a gym would be really cool. I don't know if I would open one for the public or just myself and my friends, but we'd have to see down the road how that goes.
All right. Well, yeah, it's the interesting thing. So just a little bit of a tangent, but my gym owner, he started like his name is Murph. Of course, the gym I've been going to since 2012. When he started doing strongman, he's actually the one that introduced like novice classes into the sport. But he was one of the kind of mentioned where like he wants people to do strongman because it's good at the sport, it grows the sport, but it's also wants strongman to be one of those things where it's an exclusive club and you can only be in the club. So it kind of like, so it's tough. So like, of course you want to do strongman with like-minded people, but you also want individuals to get into the sport. So it's always a kind of a hard line, but I think going forward, again, I think as all of us, we need the support from everybody too. And then especially now with CrossFit being as big it is to potentially open the sport, but I'm on the same boat. I want to have a gym one day, but I don't know what the size of the gym is going to be. So that's pretty much all my questions for today, Mr. West, but you've been a awesome guest. And to finish out the show, I want you to leave the listeners one word of advice.
So Self-regulation.
Elaborate.
That is why I think I've had the success that I've had, is because I have tremendous self-regulation in my training, and I'm not, I'm not the big Instagram presence because I don't post these big lifts or anything on Instagram. But when it comes to contests, I can perform, or at least perform well. And I believe that comes down to self-regulation. I don't get caught up in like, oh, this guy on Instagram is doing like 50 pounds more than me, or he's already crushing the event. It's like, well, it's awesome. He's on his own equipment in his own gym, in his own climate control, whatever the hell he needs. But, we go to Worlds, we're out in a tent in the heat, and there's so many different environments to compete in, or different scenarios that come up. Like the guy passed out in the stands when we were doing the event, and we had to take a break. Like, are you ready for that? Like, who knows? The smallest little thing can throw someone off. Or that one day where you decided to throw an extra 50 pounds on your deadlift for no reason because someone on Instagram did 50 pounds more than you. Like, is it worth it? Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, that's some great advice. So if people wanted to follow your journey, what's the best way to follow you?
On Instagram at strongman_moose is the easiest way to follow me there. Yeah.
And then, so I'll post that below. But yeah, give, of course, Wes a follow. Any thoughts about a YouTube page in the future?
Possibly, but it's as you know, with the podcast, it's very time consuming, and
Sure.
Myself and my wife, we live a pretty busy life, and training has to come first, and then maybe if someone wanted to follow me around the gym with their camera, we could talk about it. But me personally doing it, I don't have any plans on it right this second.
All right. So no filming yourself going down the Niagara Falls
No,
in a barrel. No.
Yeah, Niagara Falls, too many tourists.
Oh yeah, I've been there a couple of times. Of course, enjoyed it. So make sure you follow Wes. Of course, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, so you know when all the podcasts are coming out. Wes, you've been a terrific guest. I can't wait for another time for us to compete with each other. But thank you for coming on.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm going to end it, but don't you go anywhere.
Okay, buddy.